All right, let's call our meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, every person has had the opportunity to take a look at the meeting minutes. Does anyone have any edits, additions, or other things of notes before we take a motion on the minutes? No. No? All right. I'd entertain a motion to accept.
I move.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hands. Perfect, thank you. Now I will turn it over to the Inspector General for any updates.
Good afternoon. At this time, I think we all are aware of some of the challenges that we're still dealing with within the city's network. So I don't have any updates right now, but I should be able to send something out to the board by the end of the week of some updates. And then hopefully by the next meeting, which will be our September meeting, we'll be presenting our quarterly report. We just haven't had a chance to finalize some of that data yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Also looking forward to whenever everything is back up and running. All right. Next, we're going to have a case that was submitted after cases were distributed. It was sent to all board members. I will do the review and readout. It was relatively short, however, due to the timing of it, the officer at issue is set to retire soon, and so the hope is to have the board complete its review of the case relatively quickly so that it occurs before that happens. So a review of case number 2024-0854. This was a traffic incident in which the complainant alleged misconduct by a CPD officer, alleging that the officer failed to stop at 3 different stop signs, and the complainant recorded 2 of those incidents. The IG completed an investigation, took a look at unit history data, reviewed the video provided by the complainant, interviewed the complainant, interviewed the focus officer, and also CPD policies and procedures. Following the review and pertaining to the investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegations and the officer's actions violated CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, the DIG recommends the allegation against the officer be closed as sustained. Does anyone have any questions after having taken a review of the report? No? Okay. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the recommendation as given by the IG in case number 2024-0854. So moved. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion about this case? Nope. All right. All in favor of supporting the recommendation, please raise your hands. All right. Ayes have it. Thank you. All right, now turning over to, let's see, Pastor Nathan is not here, so Board Member Strickland, can I go to your subcommittee for?
No updates from our subcommittee this week.
Okay. Do you have your next meeting scheduled already?
We do not. And I actually wanted to ask a few questions about that, just in terms of since our previous board member, Kelly Pinkleton's no longer on the board, and then kind of the switch up, we've got just 2 members on our committee, our subcommittee. It was my understanding that we had to have at least more than that in terms of for voting purposes, but wanted just to check in on kind of what our plan of action is, given that we are short a number of members.
So to my knowledge, we do have one more person who, I don't know if they've turned in their application, but who at least was completing an application and submitting. Do we have any other updates? Does anyone from the city attorney's office or from the IG know whether the mayor has any other candidates to fill the vacancies we currently have?
I usually reach out to you to ask.
I've heard crickets.
Yeah,
so.
same.
I'll let Stephanie know, and then we can make sure that we send an email out to you to let you know if there's any updates.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Yep, that would be great. Again, the plea to the community, if there are folks who are interested. The application is actually available online on the mayor's website. You can find it and download it, complete it, and submit it. And I will continue to follow up and see if we've got any viable candidates who are going to be passed along. Since Dr. Jones is here, I will turn it over to you all for your committee report.
Just in time, huh? All right, so we have several cases, so I'll just get into it. This is case number, or complaint number 2024-0390. On March 13th, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of the Inspector General alleging use of force against her daughter and misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant alleged her daughter was punched multiple times by the officer when she, the complainant's daughter, was experiencing a mental episode and the officer used profanity. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a body-worn camera review, cruiser video system, computer-aided dispatch information, Columbus Police use of force documentation and related incidents reports, a telephone interview with the complainant, and an in-person interview with the involved officer. As it pertains to the first allegation that the officer used force against the complainant's daughter, the investigation found that force was used within policy by the officer. It is recommended that the first allegation be closed with the finding of exonerated. The second allegation of misconduct, where the officer was alleged to have used profanity, the investigation did not find that misconduct occurred, so it is recommended the allegation be closed with the finding of unfounded, and we agreed with that finding. Second, I went backwards. So this is case number 2024-0312. On February 28, 2024, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint of excessive use of force by 2 Columbus Division of Police officers via email. The complainant alleged that on February 26, 2024, the father of a child was at the Mount Street Market when he was approached by officers. The complainant alleged that multiple other officers arrived at the scene, and the child's father was beaten badly. The complainant attempted to locate him by calling the Franklin County Clerk of Courts and Grant Hospital, but stated she could not locate him, and she was fearful that CPD did something to cause him serious harm because he should be in jail for the warrants and is nowhere to be found. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of computer-aided dispatch data, unit history, body-worn camera footage, cruiser video footage, surveillance footage from the Mount Street Market, review of use of force reports written by the focus officers, an interview with the complainant, interview with focus officers, interview with subject of force, an interview with 2 other witnesses. The DIG's investigation determined that the use of force was within policy and procedure. It's recommended that this complaint of excessive force be closed as unfounded. We agreed with that finding. Case number 2024-0405. March 18, 2024, City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging misconduct by a Columbus Division of Police officer. Via the DIG email, the complainant alleged he followed a self-proclaimed CPD officer on Facebook with an account named Thoughts of a Patrol Officer and questioned if a few of the officer's posts would qualify as unbecoming conduct and impact the officer's ability to serve the public regardless of race or gender. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of the received email, the Facebook account, Thoughts of a Patrol Officer, interview of the officer, and a review of CPD policies and procedures. The investigation revealed that the officer does not specifically identify as a Columbus police officer or make an affiliation to CPD on any social media platform. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. During the investigation, the Columbus DIG reviewed CPD policies and procedures addressing social media, external communications, reviewed screenshots of posts received from the initial complaint from Thoughts of a Patrol Officer Facebook account, reviewed the Facebook account itself. Columbus DIG concluded that the actions imposed by the officer on the Facebook account violates CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. This was one that we agreed with the second finding. We did not agree with the first finding of unfounded. We thought it should be sustained as well, because you can easily identify which agency the officer works for. Case number 2024-0418. On March 19th, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Department of the Inspector General alleging excessive use of force by a Columbus Division of Police officer. Complainant alleged the officer was overly aggressive during her encounter, which caused her head to strike the ground, caused scrapes on the face and bruises to the arms. Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera footage, computer-aided dispatch, event chronology report, the unit history report, interviews with the complainant and involved CPD officer, a review of cruiser video footage, and a review of the use of force report. Use of force investigation was conducted by the focused officer's supervision as is standard practice in all reportable uses of force. The investigation found the officer's level 1 use of force was reasonable and within CPD policy. Based on the evidence reviewed, the Columbus DIG concurs with CPD's use of force investigation findings that the officer's use of force was within policy. Therefore, it is recommended the complaint be closed as unfounded. We agreed with that finding. Case number 2024-0445. On March 22nd, 2024, Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging excessive force by a Columbus police officer. Complainant alleged an officer laid over a juvenile and shoved his face into the gravel 2 times. DIG investigation consisted of a review of the computer-aided dispatch, CPD's use of force report, review of the body-worn camera for a focus officer, an interview with the complainant, interview with the focus officer, review of applicable CPD policies and procedures. DIG found that the officer's use of force was within division policy. The investigation found no evidence to support the allegation that the officer laid over a juvenile and shoved his face into the gravel 2 times. Therefore, it is recommended that the complainant's allegation against the officer be closed with the finding of unfounded. During the investigation, the DIG did discover, however, the officer failed to activate his body-worn camera prior to contact with the juvenile involved in the incident and review of CPD policies and procedures involving BWC. The Columbus DIG concluded the officer's failure to activate the body-worn camera that it did violate policy, so that allegation is sustained. So with regards to the initial allegation, we agreed, and then the additional allegation, we agreed as well. Okay.
Could I ask just a quick question?
Sure.
So there was no body-worn camera to indicate whether force was used on the juvenile or not, because he had not turned his BWC on?
Prior to
the.
Correct.
So what evidence did they base their finding that he did not shove the juvenile to the ground?
The interview with the complainant. There was an interview with the focus officer also. No, it happened. It's just it was within policy.
Okay.
That's why it was unfounded.
There was body camera that was from the other officer.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see, Mary, now you threw me off. Which one was that?
0485.
All right. 0485. All right. March 29th, the Columbus Department of the Inspector General received a complaint alleging misconduct by a Columbus Division of Police officer via the DIG hotline. The complainant alleged an officer responded with his gun drawn to a car accident that took place on 4th Street and Hudson Avenue. The DIG investigation consisted of a review of the officer, a review of the body-worn camera footage, a review of CPD policies and procedures. The investigation revealed the officer was within policy responding to the accident with his weapon drawn. He was actually responding to a persons with a gun run, so that's what happened. Once the officer arrived on scene and he realized that that was not the case, he explained that to the involved party, the reasoning why he arrived like that. So therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed as exonerated. We agreed with that, and the investigation revealed due to a weapon being drawn, a firearms display should have been completed by the officer for this matter. However, he did not do that, and that is a violation of CPD policy and procedures, so it is recommended that that allegation be sustained. We agreed with that allegation as well.
And was that one added?
That was an additional, yes. This is case 2024-0511. On April 3rd, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Inspector General alleging police misconduct against Columbus police officers. The complainant was a pedestrian victim involved in a hit-skip traffic crash that alleged the officers did not take a traffic crash report. The DIG's investigation consisted of a review of computer-aided dispatch information, body-worn camera footage, review of the Department of Public Safety traffic crash retrieval portal, traffic crash report review, telephone interview with the complainant, in-person interviews with the officers. Regarding the allegation that officers failed to take a traffic crash report, the investigation found neither officer completed a traffic crash report for the hit-skip incident reported by the complainant. Therefore, it is recommended that that allegation for both officers be closed as sustained. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's evidence or allegation. So that was the only one for that. And we agreed with that finding. This is case 2024-0512. April 3rd, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the Columbus Division or Department of Inspector General alleging use of excessive force against him by 2 Columbus police officers. The complainant alleged the officer punched him in the face during a traffic arrest. DIG's investigation consisted of a review of the body-worn camera, the computer-aided dispatch information, a use of force documentation, telephone intake interview with the complainant, in-person interviews with both officers involved. With regard to the allegation that officers use excessive force, the investigation against the complainant, the investigation, the use of force was within CPD policy and not excessive. It is recommended that the allegation be closed as unfounded. We agree with that finding. This is complaint 2024-0533. April 8th, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the Department of Inspector General alleging police misconduct by a Columbus police officer. Complainant alleged that on April 5th, he was driving on 270. He saw an officer driving at an excessive rate of speed. It was within, I think, 75 to 90 miles an hour in a 65 mile per hour zone. He alleged when the officer accelerated past his vehicle, the officer actually cut him off in front of his vehicle and activated the cruiser spotlight onto his vehicle while he was on the interstate. DIG investigation review consists of review of the electronically submitted citizen complaint, DIG hotline voicemail, dash camera video footage obtained from the complainant, computer-aided dispatch information, GPS data, and vehicle activity report for the cruiser that was driven, and this was on a special duty assignment, interview with the focus officer, information from the Columbus Division of Police Fleet Management Services, review of applicable CPD policies and procedures, and pertaining to allegation 1 and review of the officer's statement and the speed information for the cruiser, the investigation found evidence that did substantiate the complainant's allegations and actions taken by the officer, that he violated CPD policies and procedures. So that's sustained. We agreed with that. And then pertaining to the allegation 2, while the officer was exiting, this is continuing from 71 to Route 665, the officer shined his spotlight on the vehicle. The investigation found evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegations and the actions taken by the officer violated CPD policies and procedures. That one is also recommended to be or closed as sustained, and we agreed with that one as well. 2 more. This is case 2024-0700. May 6, 2024, the Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant alleged an officer told her that her son was not going to be criminally charged in regards to an altercation he was in at Easton, and then charged her son with disorderly conduct after he found out the son had a warrant. So the Columbus DIG investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, review of the CAD data, review of the body-worn camera, a review of Easton's security footage, an interview with the focus officer, and a review of policies and procedures. The evidence, or the investigation found evidence to substantiate the allegation that the officer did tell the complainant that her son was not going to be criminally charged in regards to an altercation he was at in Easton, and then charged her son with disorderly conduct. And this was after the officer found out that the son had a warrant. This is within CPD policy, so therefore it is recommended that the allegation be closed as exonerated, as the actions were supported by CPD policies and procedures, and we agree with that one. And then the last one is 2024-0854.
We did that, Stephanie had it on. the
Oh,
agenda
she already had it on
earlier,
the agenda?
so
Oh, okay.
So that one, we already voted on.
All right, so in references to, or are you going to read them, or you want me to just go ahead?
Up to you. You got it. I color-coded the highlights, but you feel free to read them out for your motions.
All right. So we move to accept the findings on case 2024-0312, 2024-0390, 2024-0405. Did you catch the ones where we had added the extra ones? Because you might have to.
Yes, the 0405, if you want to hold that out, because that's where you disagreed with one, agreed with the
Oh,
other.
yeah, okay, so we'll take out 0405, hold on that one. 2024-0418, 2024-0445,
And an additional one.
and the additional one on that one, 2024-0485, and the additional one on that one as well, 2024-0511, as well as 2024-0512, and we didn't do the last one, right? Or 0533.
Yep.
We agree with that one, and then 0700. We move to accept the findings of those investigations.
Okay. May I have a second, please? Okay. Anyone have any questions on any of those cases? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting those recommendations as given, please raise your hands. All of those motions carry. And then in case number 24-0405, looks like the subcommittee would instead, tell me if this is right, would like to move for a finding of sustained on both allegations.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I would entertain a motion. Okay, I have a second.
Second.
Okay, anyone have questions on that? No? All right, all in favor of accepting findings of sustained on case number 24-0405, please raise your hands. Motion carries. Thank you. Board Member Younger, you are up next.
Okay. Number one, case number 2024-0411, March 18th, 2024, there was an allegation of misconduct by CPD officer. The complainant alleged he was harassed by that officer who was working at a bar called Muggsy's Pub and Patio. The complainant made two allegations. One, the officer harassed him by telling him he was trespassing and would go to jail if he did not show his ID. And two, the officer cussed at him. The IG's investigation consisted of CAD, review of BWC for the focus officer, an interview of the complainant, interviews with the two officers involved, interviews with a witness from Muggsy's Bar, and a review of policy and procedure. As to allegation number one, the officer told the complainant that he was trespassing and would go to jail if he did not provide his ID. The investigation found that this did occur but was within CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended that this be closed as unfounded. As to allegation number two, the officer cussed at the complainant. The investigation confirmed this allegation. A review of the BWC revealed the officer did use profanity, which is a violation of CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as sustained. The officer used profanity, not at the individual, but in conversation, but it is still a violation of policy and procedure. Our review committee reviewed it and accepted the findings of the Inspector General. Case number 2024-0443. March 22nd, 2024, there was a complaint alleging misconduct. The allegation stemmed from the complainant approaching the officer while the officer was completing a scene investigation. The complainant alleged the officer became upset and walked up to the complainant and chest bumped him. The investigation consisted of CAD data, BWC for the focus officer, interview with the complainant, interview with the focus officer, review of policy and procedure. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the allegation of a chest bump, as the complainant alleged. A review of the BWC found no evidence of physical contact between the officer and the complainant. Additionally, the investigation found the officer did not violate any policy and or procedure. It is recommended that this be closed as unfounded. Additionally, the DIG discovered it was able to confirm the officer used profanity. A review of the BWC revealed the officer used profanity, which is a violation of CBD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as sustained. We reviewed the complainant's allegation. We agree with the finding of the IG, and we move to accept both allegations. And as to the, we also accept the finding of the use of profanity because it is a violation of CPD policy. All right, so that's a separate allegation there. Let's just, okay, number 3. 2024-0451, March 25th, 2024. There's an allegation of police misconduct. The complainant alleged officers did not arrest his ex-girlfriend after she pointed a firearm at him during a disturbance incident. The evidence consisted of a review of CAD, BWC, a telephone intake interview with the complainant, and an in-person interview with both officers, respectively, who responded to the incident. Regarding the allegation that the officers failed to arrest the complainant's ex-girlfriend, the investigation found that no misconduct occurred. During the officer's investigation of the disturbance call, there was no probable cause basis for an arrest to be made. It is recommended that this allegation be closed as exonerated. Our committee reviewed, we agreed with the findings of the Inspector General. Case number 2024-0467. March 20th, 2024, a complaint was made that was referred from the Department of the Public Safety's Human Resources Division. The complainant alleged that they'd taken a photo of the listed officer smoking on city property, which caused them to get upset, block the complainant's vehicle in, and confront them. The complainant advised that the officer they took the photo because the officer was taking up 4 spaces and smoking. The officer continued to ask why they'd taken the photo after the complainant had answered them several times. The complainant alleged that the officer threatened them with an investigation. The complainant alleged that the officer called them just a civilian and that the officer kept getting louder. The complainant concluded that they felt threatened and had to call their supervisor to speak with the officer so they could leave. The DIG's investigation consisted of review of the complaint, review of the surveillance video from the parking lot, which were the photos that the individual, the complaining person, took, a statement with the complainant, a review of the photos, I'm repeating myself, a review of the photos received from the complainant, an interview with the witness, an interview of the focus officer, as well as a review of the applicable directives. The investigation determined that for allegation 1, the officer was smoking. However, this was prior to his shift and was therefore not a violation of CPD directives. As the policy does not state that an officer may not smoke on city property, that was not made in the allegation. This would not be a violation of policy if true. The investigation found the officer's actions were not in line with Division Directive 1.01 Rules of Conduct, Section 1.15, which states in part, division personnel shall be civil, orderly, and courteous in their conduct and demeanor. Therefore, it is recommended that this portion of the allegation be sustained. Our review committee talked about this case for quite a while, and we agree with the findings of the IG as to the smoking of the cigarette. It was prior, so that was fine. But as to what the how the officer proceeded, we agree with sustaining. The officer here was a sergeant who had been on the force for 27 years, and reviewing the analysis of it, we see that he went above and beyond in being very threatening, et cetera. So we accept the findings of the IG on that particular case. As to case number 2024-0487, on March 29th, 2024, the IG received notification of an incident involving a minor and members of CPD from Franklin County Children's Services. It is common practice for Franklin County to make referrals to the IG for investigation in this type of incident. The incident stemmed from the minor attempting to steal a vehicle from a parking lot. FCCS reported that a minor was taken to the ground by the arresting officers after the minor refused to get into the van. FCCS reported that the minor suffered minor injuries. The DIG's investigation reviewed BWC footage, review of FCCS paperwork, a review of the use of force report from the incident, and review of directives. The investigation found that the officer's use of force during the arrest was absolutely within CPD policy. Additionally, the DIG was unable to make contact with the minor involved in the incident or to make contact with the minor's guardian. A contact letter was mailed to the guardian of the minor, and the DIG never received a response. The DIG concurred with the CPD's use of force investigation findings that the officer's actions were within CPD policy. Therefore, the DIG recommends that this referral complaint from FCCS be closed as an administrative closure. Our review committee reviewed, and we agree with the findings of the IG. Okay. 2024-0496, April 1, 2024. This is an allegation of misconduct. The complainant alleged that the officers used excessive force on her on March 19, 2024 at 595 Van Buren Drive. Okay. The DIG's investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, a review of the BWC footage, a review of CPD policy and procedure. The investigation revealed officers arrived on the scene to the Van Buren shelter where the complainant was coming out of the door in her wheelchair. A worker at the Van Buren shelter expressed concerns of the complainant's behavior and actions. Therefore, the medics and officers attempted to allow the complainant to voluntarily go with them to the hospital and be checked out. After multiple failed attempts to get the complainant to come voluntarily, the officers and the medics had to assist with handcuffing and placing the complainant on the stretcher due to her being handicapped and missing her right leg. The complainant did not at any time make any complaints to the officers about the handcuffs or them physically moving her. As the officers operated within CPD policy and procedures and the incident as reported by the complainant did not occur, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. Our committee reviewed, and we do concur with the IG at this time. Case number 2024. Yeah.
For that, did you have any kind of discussion among your committee? Were there any? I didn't quite understand. The complaint was filed. The person did not make a complaint at the moment, but did after the fact. So was there any kind of further discussion among the board or your committee there?
Yeah, she didn't make the complaint to the officers, but afterwards, this was a call from the shelter. There had been, the officers were dispatched on an accidental overdose. And she was, the complainant was in her wheelchair and was coming out the front door, and the officers and the medics met her. And there was a call from the facility because they wanted some help. They all went, actually she was still within the lobby there. They all went inside to the lobby of the shelter, and they met the shelter workers. The medic spoke to the complainant to assess her needs and asked if she was aware that they were present because she was high. The shelter worker explained they were concerned due to the complainant's behavior and conversation. The medic and the shelter worker both asked Ms. Lessig if she, asked the complainant if she would be willing to get checked out at the hospital. Officer asked her if if she had taken her medication that day because he was familiar with her, and she had not taken her medication. So within the 7 minutes that they were there, they were trying to get her to get on the stretcher on her own and be taken to a nearby hospital to be checked out. However, she would not attempt to do that and attempted to go back into the shelter. She was speaking frantically, making conversation about her sisters, her father, confused that she was even at the shelter, et cetera, et cetera. And they attempted to gently help her. This is per BWC. They attempted to get her onto the stretcher, but they had to handcuff her because to get her on there safely. So both officers handcuffed her. And she was yelling at them at that time. The medics assisted with picking her up from the wheelchair, placing her on the stretcher, and then they proceeded to get her to the hospital. At times during this procedure, she did voluntarily move at times to help.
And I just wanted to get clear on the specific of the complaint was about the way in which the handcuffs were, and I know there's
the complaint was the complainant alleged officers used excessive force on her on March 19th. It does not give a specific. Do you have a specific?
I'm looking. And
Okay.
That was the allegation, was that it was excessive force, and so.
That's all I have. It doesn't state specifically that the handcuffs were too tight or anything else.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in terms of that situation needed with handcuffs in particular, if that's within policy there in terms of why did she need to be placed in handcuffs, and then.
It states here that basically it was for her own safety.
Is that standard? Like, I don't know in terms of, I know she was at the shelter and.
I'm just going to read the interview. This is on page 2. So when the investigator called, she had a conversation with the complainant. The complainant's allegation was she was stating that she felt that the officers used excessive force, and when they asked her, well, what are you saying happened, she stated the officers placed handcuffs in front of her body instead of behind her back, and she also stated that the officers picked her up and placed her on a stretcher. So a lot of times complainants will call and say, I want to make an allegation of excessive use of force. When we call them back, we try to get specific. What are you saying is excessive use of force? And in this case, that's what she was saying. That was not excessive. The officers did do that, but that was not excessive.
Thank you for that. And just so clarification on how you handle, like how that situation is handled with somebody going through a crisis there, in terms of the response being to arrest or handcuff the individual. Is that standard practice versus another way? That was just a general question I had related to to that?
I don't think, just a couple clarifications. I don't think she was arrested. I think she was cuffed because
They were taking her.
they were
You're
taking
right.
her and
You're right.
she's not complying with getting on the bed. They all feel like the shelter called because they don't think she's safe, but she's also not complying with getting on the bed to go get evaluated. So that's the force they could use. And if I recall correctly, the handcuffing in front of the body is because she's missing a leg, because handcuffing her behind her back would have created a higher fall risk. Like people who are pregnant typically are cuffed in front. People who have a risk of harming themselves if they were to, and not being able to put their hands in front of them. So just from what I read, it looked like it was solely used to get her on the bed because she otherwise was using her arms to fight getting out of her wheelchair and onto the bed. Does that sound right?
That would be correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And she did not at any time make an issue about the officers handcuffing her in front of her body as opposed to behind. And we did have BWC here, and they even described it as gently, and they even got help from the shelter individuals. And that's why our committee agreed that,
They have their like crisis team or their teams involved there in that situation?
no.
Okay. Something to consider?
Well, I don't know if they had any available or not.
And I believe that I believe you have someone that's going to be coming to speak to the board. So we do know that there are crisis prevention team members out there, but it's very limited. And I'm only reporting what the news said. I think there was some money coming, so we might be getting more.
But didn't the chief say that they're all being trained? As
Right,
of-
the officers are, and then there's,
As of this time, as of now, right? Aren't they all being trained? As of-
Correct. As of now, every officer that comes through Academy receives CIT training.
Yeah.
So that would be training appropriate to respond to these types of incidents. But there are specialized teams that they
Right.
have created to respond out that include social workers, things like that. And those particular teams, I do think, are very limited from a capacity perspective. And so you can ask more of the CIT representative when they come in September with regard to what their plans are to maybe increase the staffing for that force, or what can be done in the alternative while they are working with the staff that they have now.
Okay, thank you. 2024-0543, April 8th, 2024. There was a complaint alleging excessive use of force by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged while being arrested and attempting to walk away from the officers, 1, he was thrown to the ground and had his face shoved in the ground, and 2, he told the officer he was being hurt. However, the officer would not stop. As a result, he obtained scratches on his face. The investigation consisted of review of Franklin County Common Pleas, Domestic Relations, Juvie information, BWC footage, CAD information, interview with the focus officer, information from IAB, and a review of applicable directives. Pertaining to allegation number 1, in review of BWC footage and the use of force report, the investigation revealed the officer gave a loud verbal command to stop when the complainant began to flee. The complainant did not comply with the officer's command, and the officer gained control of the complainant by using both hands to force the complainant to the ground. The investigation found no evidence the officer shoved the complainant's face in the ground. The administrative review of the level 1 use of force by the focus officer supervisor determined that the use of force was reasonable and within policy. The DIG's investigation concurred with this finding and found the officer's use of force was within CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. As to allegation number 2, BWC footage review and the officer's statement found no evidence that the complainant informed the officer that he was hurting and the officer would not stop. The officer told the IG, he saw the complainant had received facial scratches as a result of level 1 use of force and asked if he needed medical attention. However, the complainant responded, "I'm good." The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that this be closed as unfounded. We reviewed, we accept the findings of the Inspector General. Case number 2024-0565, April 12, 2024, allegation of misconduct. Let's see. A call was received. The complainant advised on April 11, 2024, she received a return call from the officer who cited her husband during a vehicular accident that occurred on March 28, 2024. The complainant alleged the officer was unprofessional, did not want to answer her questions, did not want to help her, and when she asked the officer to explain the meaning of driving between lanes, he responded, "Look it up." The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of a telephone interview of the complainant, an interview of the focus officer, CAD dispatch info, a review of the ECC, a review of Ohio Department of Public Safety Traffic Crash Report Incident, and a review of CPD policies. In regards to the allegation and in review of statements from the complainant and the officer, the complainant did not provide sufficient evidence to support her allegation. Furthermore, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. It is recommended that this be closed as unfounded. We reviewed it, and we agreed with the Inspector General on this case. And the last one, case number 2024-0646, April 29th, 2024. This is an allegation of misconduct. The allegation stemmed from the complainant's daughter being struck as a pedestrian by a vehicle. The complainant alleged that the officer said, "You deserved it," in regards to the complainant's daughter being struck as a pedestrian by a vehicle. The investigation consisted of the complainant, who was not present for the incident, an interview of that complainant, an interview of the focus officer, an interview of 6 witnesses from the incident, a review of CPD policy and procedures. The investigation found that there was no evidence to suggest that the officer ever stated, "You deserved it," to the complainant's daughter after she was struck by a vehicle. Therefore, the DIG recommends that this allegation be closed as unfounded. We reviewed it, and we concur with the IG's finding in this case. And I'm finished. So, as to, let's see, as to case number 2024-0411, and case number 2024-0443, I'm going to set that one aside because there's a separate, okay. So forget that one. 2024-0451, 2024-0467, 2024-0487, 2024-0496, 2024-0543, 2024-0565, 2024-0646. We move to accept the findings of the IG at this particular time.
Any second? Thank you. Any questions on those? Okay. All in favor of accepting those, please raise your hands. Okay.
And as to case number 2024-0443, we move to accept the findings of the IG as to allegation number 1 and 2. And then, no, is that correct?
I think 2 is the additional one. Is that
Oh,
right?
okay, as to allegation number 1. And then as to allegation number 2, we move to accept the finding, we move to accept the allegation of the Department of the Inspector General and the finding of the Department of the Inspector General.
May I have a second, please? Any questions on that? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, so as noted, we were originally going to have CIT presentations today, but due to scheduling issues, that is being moved to September. We do anticipate, though, being able to add that to our agenda with little issues based on the timing of both of the presentations coming in September. Any issues for policy review or discussion today from anyone?
Yes, I love this part of the agenda. Thank you. I was wondering if we could, have some follow-up conversation and discussion based on, we had a great meeting last month with the police chief that talked about a number of the questions that we had. And thanks so much, Stephanie, for the write-up and the meeting minutes here that kind of walked through what the responses were. There were also a number of things that require follow-up on. And so I just wanted to get a sense both from as a board as well as maybe from the Inspector General's office about kind of some of those follow-up items, the reports that the CPD is going to be providing regularly to the board. Do we have a sense on what that timeline is going to look like, as well as just a conversation with us as a board, which is how we might want to structure the way in which we review final reports and recommendations, given the statement by the police chief about kind of they wait to receive the cases from us before they're able to move along on this process, but also being clear that we don't want to be a bottleneck. I don't think we are a bottleneck to these cases moving ahead, but I wanted to kind of think about whether or not we should change the structure of the way in which we do these review processes.
All right, I'm going to separate some of those issues out. One of the questions was, do we have a sense of when those quarterly reports from the chief are going to start coming to the board? And I don't know that she gave us a specific timeline as to when that would start, other than it was a relatively new report that they would be engaging in, and that that's something that should be coming to us. Does anyone have any ideas? And if not, Stephanie can reach out to see if we know of a start date of when those first reports are going to roll in.
I'll reach out, but from the last meeting, she said they were trying to finish them up, and July would have been the end of that quarter. So I would just.
Okay. So perhaps the fall, maybe?
I can reach out and
Okay.
ask for the.
Thank you. All right, there was also discussion from the chief about timeline. I do think there was, as both IG Hendricks and Deputy Blunt mentioned, part of that timeline issue was from the first kind of 6 months of cases, of which we have caught up, and I don't believe there is currently a time issue. They did reference wanting to get, or maybe have, like files ready to go when reports head over to their office, and I don't know what the timeline looks like. I think it's a pretty quick turnover. Like Stephanie tends to send me the reports. I usually sign them within a day, and then once they come back to you, they go straight over there. So I don't know how to speed that up. I think the one thing we had floated potentially was, is there a way to have those packets and files kind of ready to go once the case assignments come to us, but I don't know that they can actually do anything with them if we haven't signed off on the reports yet. Anyone have any more insight, or Attorney Ross, any?
The one thing I can say is, I have reached out, so I am still waiting for CPD to get back with me. I have reached out to see if we could do a quarterly meeting with them, because I know on our end, the reports that are submitted, I know we provide whatever information they need to IAB, so I'm not aware of any issues involving that. So I think that's more of a discussion that I would love to have, just to make sure all parties that are involved are in the same room and having the same discussion so that we can all be on the same page, because I kind of think that perception may be a little bit off-putting.
Okay. Any other thoughts from any board members? Whether you were here for the meeting or were able to watch it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way the process works right now is we have very little insight into what happens after we vote on the IG's report. And I understand that there's a timeline. We'll wait until the fall, and we'll get some updates from there. But I'm not really sure where our role comes in as an independent body that's wants to talk about transparency and accountability when we kind of send cases along, they happen, and we don't get updates on what occurs. Or and so I just think as a board, if we want to think about outcomes and where we're focused on our energy, we've got to figure out some way to have the process be a lot more transparent than it currently is. That's just my personal opinion, but I'm happy to hear discussion.
If I remember correctly, didn't the IG, you all send out letters to people who file complaints to give them updates on what's going on with their case?
Absolutely. The complainants are always contacted in the beginning to let them know, obviously, because we have to talk to them and get information. And once the case is closed, we do send a letter out notifying them that the case has been forwarded to the board for review. We know that on the website, we put the cases on the website, so they are able to follow that if they want to have any input. And we have actually on a couple of occasions, I don't know if the board knows it, but we've had a couple of people that were sitting in the audience that has participated, because they wanted to see what the findings were in their reports.
And I think that's excellent. And I love that we're reaching out, letting residents know if they filed a complaint, like following up about what's the update. And I think all that works, and I like that process. Where I think things go awry is that after it comes to us, after we vote on it, it goes to CPD, and we don't know what happens to it. And so, there are some elements where we hear some things about what has happened here or there, but I do think more transparency on that side of things as a board. I think that's something we should ask for, because it's one thing to communicate to somebody who filed a complaint, hey, it's been reviewed by the board, and now that's been forwarded along to the CPD. From there, I don't know is there then additional follow-up to that complainant, or is that the end of the follow-up? And maybe whose job would it be maybe it's the board, but whose job would it be to follow up at the end of the entire process? And because that's where I'm not getting a sense of what's happening after it goes through us for a vote to CPD.
So if I remember from what the chief told us, I don't know that right now there is any, after chain of command is done and discipline is doled out, I don't believe there's any quote back to the initial complainant. I think also the impression I got was that they are still trying to figure out how they are tracking all of this information. And so I don't know that we would have had, until they decided to put together the quarterly report, I don't know that they had a process. I think that process is part of what Chief Bryant mentioned was being built when she came at the meeting. And I think, too, we talked about, if I remember correctly, that once we see the report, we can give some feedback on, do we think additional information is necessary? How would we prefer to see the information? But again, until we see the original iteration, I don't know that we can guess at kind of what that's going to look like. Yes, Ms. Brock.
I'm sorry. You guys have received the outcomes from what comes back to CPD. DIG had given you guys that full report one time that has the case number, the DIG's outcomes, the board's outcomes, and it had CPD's outcomes, even where it was highlighted if it was different than yours. It listed the corrective action on it. It's a whole entire sheet it was a spreadsheet. So we do have it, and it is given to you guys. The numbers come in the quarterly report that the DIG said she'll give to you next week because we've had issues, but we do give the numbers. And if there's a specific case that you have a question on, she said, just give her the case, and we're able to follow up with you if you have a very specific questions, but you all do receive the outcomes.
Thank you for that. We received them one time. I think that it was a great, very helpful sheet to have all of that information in one, and we're looking forward to more of that consistency, more of that information sharing. But that has not been the pattern to date. And with that said, it isn't clear what we do from there. So we were provided with all that information, and then we said, okay, this is great. And then we never talked about it again as a board. And so I think we have ceded a lot of space when it comes to really providing a space for saying, let's talk about transparency, let's talk about accountability to the broader public about what the dispositions are, what the outcomes are, what has happened. From what I recall, in that disposition sheet as well, there's not a whole lot of information about what kind of, if there was corrective action or what was taken. It's not super detailed in that sense. And so there's also not a lot of information about whether or not there are repeat incidences or repeat, incidents of complaints against individual officers. So I just think as a board, there's a role that we can play to shine a little bit more of a spotlight, have a more transparent process that we're just not getting currently. And I think if we only then put it on CPD to do, it's going to take a while. One, capacity constraints is one. They've got their own process. We obviously can't put it all on the DIG office either. But I do think there's a role that we can play as a board or as the city to have a more transparent process, a public database. Like, there are ways that we can do that that I personally do not see. I see us every time we do these monthly meetings, we read through the individual cases and walk through the process, but we very rarely have substantive discussions about the larger patterns that are occurring or not occurring. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to change some of the structure to make sure that we have some accountability on that level and transparency on that level. And the fact that the police chief came at our last meeting was a great welcome step towards that direction, but we still have a ways to go.
I'll just add briefly, and then to remember you're younger, part of when we got into this discussion last time about what additional information could be in the report, Chief Bryant let us know that the way that their report management system operates, they can only pull from it the data they put in. And so there's the ability to give us a recommended finding and final disposition, but the way that the report is kind of input in the way that Matrix works, in order for them to give us a detailed finding, I think this is what Ms. Brock was referring to, like, we'd have to ask for additional information on individual cases, which I think when we first looked at the report and folks were scrolling through it, that was something that folks did. Like, well, what about this report number and this report and what happened here? And so I think that is still a thing that we can do, but concerning like having more details on those individual sheets, that would have to be manually entered by a person each time instead of being the information that can pull from Matrix, just based on my notes from that meeting. And so, and it was at the last meeting that she said we can start getting those quarterly, which is helpful. But I think the additional detail, if we want it, we're going to have to say specifically, all right, this case, why was this one not given discipline? Or can we know what the specific corrective action was? That I don't believe is able to be put into a data dump from Matrix right now.
A lot of information, and a lot of information we do have in our spreadsheet. So when we provide the quarterly reports and the monthly report, we're providing, because it's a lot of information. So we give the board, like I pulled up the first quarterly report we have, which gives you like the breakdown of what's exonerated, what's sustained, what's unfounded. We even did go in there and we went in there and did specifics as to cases where the Civilian Review Board agreed, where the chain of command disagreed. We have all of that information there. If the board wants something specific, like, hey, we want to know what cases CPD agreed, didn't agree, I mean, we can give you those totals, but if you want to know like the specific cases, you can ask for that. That is a lot of detailed work. Again, one of the things we are trying to do is when we do talk about, I think the most important thing is when we're looking at cases that are sustained, the bottom line is CPD taking the recommendations, and is there some actions being done? And I think that we're finding that there is some actions being done. There was a report we did where we said 90% of the cases that we're doing and the recommendations we do, CPD is agreeing, and they are doing something. There are some cases in which they don't support what we're saying, and we were able to report back that case at that time was because we were exonerating the term use of force. And they were like, well, you can't exonerate use of force because if you can't exonerate excessive use of force because if it's excessive use of force, it's not within policies. And so we made those changes. So again, what we're trying to do is still get back to meet with CPD, to do those quarterlies, to ask some of these questions and be able to provide some of the information that the board does have. Again, it's still, we're still learning. CPD is still learning. And I know one of the questions that you also stated is looking at trends and what is the board doing. I wanted to make a note, the board said, you noticed when you were doing the reports about special duty cameras. Look at what's being done now. That has been brought to attention. I believe the last thing I saw on a news conference is that they're getting some more funding to do that. So there are things, it's just minor, they're steps. I don't know if the board, remember there's a report that the board approved involving an officer misconduct. I just won't get into all of the details, but that officer's conduct, that officer was let go. So there's so many things that are being done and things that are being tracked. So I think it's just, just steps, small steps. So I think it's a bigger picture here.
I appreciate that. And quick question, just following up on this idea of kind of closing a thread for a complainant, how feasible is it for, whether it's with the timing of the quarterly reports, if that's when the exchange of information is happening, for us or the IG's office to send kind of a final letter letting them know here's the final resolution following all the steps, here's what happened, so that a complainant can know without having to do a public records request on their own. An officer was disciplined, or in the case of the case you just mentioned, officer was terminated following this incident, or what have you.
We can definitely do that. One of the things we get the final report back from IAB. Stephanie usually puts that in our database, and all that is just when she puts it in there, we can set up for the notice to just go to whoever the investigator is that's handling that case. We'll create another final letter in which that investigator can just know to send out a final notice. And sometimes it's letters, emails, and sometimes it's phone calls. So be aware, sometimes complainants don't leave phone numbers. There's times when we call them back, the phone number's disconnected. If they leave us an email, we can follow up with the email. If they leave us an address, we can follow up with address. But yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you. And Board Member Younger? Sorry.
First of all, I really like that spreadsheet. But I have a question. We had a case where the allegation was sustained by the IG, and then the board got it, and we sustained that allegation, and then the CPD, I can't remember, they got it, and it was unfounded. and there was no explanation in the explanation portion there. So at this point, do we as a board get back to you to find out what their thought process was there? I mean, reach out to them who?
I mean,
No,
The IG?
CPD?
You definitely can reach out. What we have to do is just pull those note sections again, because
Okay.
usually whatever CPD's finding is, the note section is in there, and if it's not a problem for us to reach out and say, hey, what is your finding? Again, what I will say is, and Tia can probably comment, there have been times where the findings that we have, they've turned around and they've unfounded it. One of the things that they were saying is because it took too long, the process. So again, there were things that me and Tia had talked about, and we're still in the process of talking about. As we go forward, some of their reasons, timeline is not going to be an issue anymore. So sometimes if they said, hey, we agree, but we're not going to do any action because it was long-term, that's not something that's going to occur anymore. So, but if you want to know what happened, please, I would say reach out to us. It's a lot easier for us to go into the database, pull up that route slip, and see exactly what the finding is and be able to report it out to you. That's a simple email for us.
Okay, and then just one final thing. Whatever they find, though, that's it, isn't it? We have, I mean, if it's unfounded.
It always is, right? I mean, it is ultimately the chain of, yeah, I mean, the police chief, ultimately, that's where the final determination is, I think.
I just want to verify.
There's an arbitration process that the officer can request after a disciplinary hearing has occurred.
Yeah.
So there is
But if there's
an additional.
But if there's an unfounded, that doesn't.
Right. I mean, if the officer does not want to bring in an arbitrator, right, and obviously,
it's over.
potentially speaking, if it is unfounded, then the officer
hypotheticals.
may not want to. But there is an extra step beyond just the disciplinary hearing that can happen in the event that folks don't agree with the findings of the chain of command.
But as a board,
We're finished.
No, but as a board, you could call a hearing and ask if you wanted to. I'm not saying we would, but you could ask about a specific set of cases or decisions that were made in cases that just are different from the findings from the DIG and the CRB. Like, we can have a hearing about that. Like, there's nothing stopping our board from doing that.
A board that, I mean, a hearing?
I don't know.
Can we do that? I don't think so.
I don't think,
About
you can't have the hearing
individual
afterwards.
Cases, but we have not outlined a process for having additional hearings following a disposition that is different from our own.
Yeah, the hearings would be for purposes of determining, like, on any particular complaint on the front end, not on the back end.
So I guess the question I'd have is, let's say there was, in the hypotheticals here, I'm trying to get a sense of how this process could work. Let's say the DIG comes up with a finding and they go through their cases, they send it to us, we agree, and then let's say CPD just completely, this doesn't happen a lot, but just completely disagrees, like maybe the evidence or whatever it might be, and it's in a way that, like, we're like, wait a minute, like, there's some disagreements here. We wouldn't be able to then call a...
Under 235.03, which lists the board's duties, there are provisions in subsections A, 6 and 7 to review and make recommendations regarding division of police policies and procedures, perform such other duties not inconsistent with the provisions of this charter. So you could, reach out to the division of police and say, we have concerns about the way your decision-making, like you didn't follow the chain of command, you didn't apply something properly. You could voice an opinion about that and apply pressure related to that, but it doesn't necessarily change that decision. It would just be prospective in nature.
Got it, okay.
Apply pressure with a letter?
Well, right, yeah, no, sure, like some official vote of the board, or some type of document, letter from the board asserting concern over a particular policy, practice, procedure.
Yeah, I guess that's what I don't think. Again, we're not going to be able to actually change the disposition in a particular case, but I do think if there comes to a point where we're able to be zeroed back and look at these things big picture, and there are patterns that we find concerning, we should address that, whether communicating that through a letter or, you can also, maybe not about the specifics of a specific case, but talk about, bring somebody in to have a conversation about their process. I think that's warranted for us to consider.
In mind, because we can't change the chain of commands. Whatever they say goes. That's in our rules. But I think if it becomes egregious, I think a letter and whatever you said over there, Mr. Tobias, I think that might be a good way to go. Yeah.
Anyone have anything else they'd like to?
I had one about the timeline.
Okay.
I was like, I'm going to use this policy review discussion. The one about the timeline, again, I don't know how this would work, but I wanted to figure this out. There was a conversation last time about maybe we're the ones that are delaying the process. The way it currently works right now is that, for the most part, when we get the reports from DIG, we agree on like 99% of the cases or some, the decisions that are made by the DIG, and then we forward that along to CPD, who then does their investigation and goes through their whole process again. Is there a way in which we can forward along the cases or the top line? I don't know. Is there a way where as soon as their report is done, that we can move this along to CPD?
That's exactly what I asked about 20 minutes ago, if that was possible. And I don't know that it is, because the assistant lieutenant who was here said there's nothing they can do until they get our signed off reports. So even if we did forward it, it would be a negligible time difference, because they still aren't authorized to act until the signed board report, the piece of paper that I sign after all of our meetings.
Yeah, I guess I'd want to ask further, like, is there a way in which, I'm just trying to get a sense of why that is. Like, if there's not another way to structure this. I want to be creative. Like, is there a way to be creative so that they can move on this process? Or do we immediately cede our ability to weigh in on something as soon as we give it the sign off?
I think that, yes, if we were to send it to them saying, here it is, go ahead and go, then we're either skipping ourselves. But I don't think that process, with the exception of, like, let's take it for today. The cases we heard today, there was about a 30-day turnaround, right? And I don't know that we're going to get any better than that unless we increase the frequency of our own meetings to every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, which I don't believe anyone wants to do.
We would have to increase the frequency of our subcommittee meetings.
Yes.
We already know that people are not regularly holding subcommittee meetings, so
Yeah.
that would be part of that.
So I think the timeline discussion was a holdover from the origins of how we started and how long it took us to get going. But even when we had Stephanie check on what our average case time was, and it's better now than it was when she checked, we were between, I want to say, like 55 and 75 days for case turnarounds. So
the worry I have is, like, there's a lot we miss. Like, so it goes through, so the DIG goes through the process. We then review the process, agree or disagree, whatever it might be. Then it gets forwarded on to CPD. And from there, we literally don't weigh in on their investigation process. I mean, like, at all. Like, there's, huh?
They don't weigh in on ours.
Yeah, but court, why would they weigh in on ours?
I mean, I think it's the same inversely too. Like part of
We're the review board.
But we're
but
independent.
yeah,
exactly.
we're independent just like they are as well. So I think this is part of why we hope to get kind of our update on the FOP contract, just as a reminder of how their process works, because I don't believe we're not going to change their part of the process. I think we can ask, again, as we've already talked about, we can ask for results of, what's happened. We can ask for updates, but we can't change kind of what's happening on their, like how they're doing their investigations.
We
don't
have a
any
little bit
power
more
of that.
input because at least the way it currently works, we provide more scrutiny to the DIG's office and their investigations than we do CPD. We really don't even have an opinion on how CPD does their investigations. So to me, as a civilian police review board that reviews investigations that are obviously brought by CPD, I feel like we could probably add a little bit more, whether it's transparency or scrutiny, on CPD's process. And I'm just trying to figure out the way to creatively do that. The way to do that in a way that is, again, trying to work with them. Ultimately, we're trying to work to get outcomes we'd like to see in terms of as a process for transparency, accountability more broadly, something that the police chief mentioned that she would like to see as well. And so I think the question is, if we're just providing scrutiny on how DIG does their reporting and then not saying anything about how CPD does their process, how does that move us to where we need to go?
Yes.
I had, I'm just going to not talk on all of the totals because I want to make sure, but one of the things, the question that was brought up last time was the timeline that it takes for the board to review, the timeline it takes once those reports are sent over to CPD for those to get back to us. So I did have my management analyst look up those dates. So we're gonna confirm them, but I'm looking at the report. But it looked like for 2024, and again, remember 2022, we're all learning. Same thing with 2023. So for 2023, they were saying it took almost an average of 140 days for us to get anything back from CPD. But whereas we are with 2024, their average turnaround right now seems to be 44 days. I'm just going to go up and look at what he did for the average turnaround for the board review, for the reports we give the board and the goal. So it looks like back in 2022, which again was the beginning, it was 116 days. But in 2023, that went to 68 days was the turnaround. And here we are at 2024, the average turnaround is 52 days. So we're going to put more of that information out, but as you can see, the turnaround, as we learn and we get more comfortable, it's that turnaround time is shortening. So I don't feel like the board, CPD has their time frame. I think the board will have their time frame. And then we have the 90-day that we're confined to get our investigation. So I think you can see that everyone is playing their part and the time frame is not where it started. I just thought it was important for the board to see that. And we're going to push that information out, but again, we just, had some numbers that we're still working on.
I appreciate that. That's what I thought was happening and what we anticipated, right? Like,
Absolutely.
We had discussions about how long this might take, also giving our process an opportunity to work through itself so we can get on more of a rhythm, which I think we're doing much better now. And I think that reality exists for CPD as well, as far as the return back. So thank you for that. I'm glad you were able to crunch the numbers and have them here for us.
I mean, and thank you for that. I do have the broader question, which is, is the board just kind of accepting the fact that we will provide quite a bit of time and scrutiny on the DIG investigations and their process, but basically do little to nothing when it comes to commenting on or reviewing or having an opinion on CPD's investigation process, their follow-up?
Well, just to reiterate, like, as the board, our job is to review the reports and recommendations, investigations of the IG's office. Like, that's just a function of
100%.
who we are. It's not, and again, this is why I think we should go back to hearing about FOP contract, reminding ourselves of where the limits of our power and authority are, because I think that is, and again, as already mentioned today, if we want to, at the end of a case, say, hey, we actually are concerned about the fact that no discipline was done here, if we want to make a statement about it at a meeting, if you want to, make a motion to have something more official about our own thoughts on an outcome, I guess we can have space for that. But we don't have any actual authority over the process through which CPD takes in its chain of command. Like, that is just, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tobias, Ms. Ross, we can't, we don't have the ability to do that. Now, unless and until a part of the contract is changed that gives us some additional authority, which I can't anticipate happening, that's kind of where we exist right now.
While you're talking, I'm looking through the bylaws and the rules and regs about the hearing, and it definitely indicates that it's for reports related to the DIG, not post-action by the police. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, there's more we could do as a board to ask questions about findings, to ask questions about process, to get more clarity on that, to ask about transparency. They've got a management system that tracks this stuff, to talk about more public database. Like, there's nothing, I understand that we don't have the quote unquote power to do it, but I mean, or to force anybody to do that, but you can ask, surely we can ask questions, or we could structure our board in a way that gets at this broader issue, which is also part of the bylaws around patterns and practices. I mean, we've done nothing very little when it comes to patterns and practices.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't say we've done nothing, because in fact, the IG has already highlighted, in which Chief Bryant came and told us, all the times that we have made recommendations and requests about special duty officers and body-worn cameras, that was heard. And the city's in the process of securing funds to get a sufficient amount of body-worn cameras. So it's not we've done nothing. I think that...
Put me up in the middle of what I was saying.
Yeah, because you have said the same thing now.
No, it was
four different ways.
It was related to, in terms of, we have not submitted a report, like an annual report from the review board ever. I don't believe. I mean, we've been in existence for...
We had an annual report. The IG presented it to us. I can't remember the date. I'm sure we can find it, but we actually have.
Yeah, but specifics to patterns and practices, there's been very little as a board. It's true, and it's not to say it's a bad thing. I'm just saying we are very focused on these individualized cases, but there have been very few instances of a broader patterns and practices that is also within the bylaws for us to talk about and bring up.
And we did discuss having a subcommittee start to put its focus on those things.
You were supposed to chair it.
Yes.
Yeah, this has been part of this process. I've on multiple occasions. I appreciate that, Dr. Jones, but multiple occasions we've submitted recommendations that I have also written down recommendations for us to consider. We have not acted on those in its entirety. I understand that. Having a space for us to have this discussion, this policy review, that was something that Chair Burns added on. That is something that has been super helpful. But the notion that this is all just on one member to, well, I was supposed to chair something and we haven't done it. Like,
If I could also, Board Member Younger and I, we also had a meeting where we were supposed to be discussing some of the recommendations that you made. You were supposed to attend that meeting and did not. And so I think there has to come a time where our subcommittee meetings have to be happening. The ad hoc meetings we have to discuss some of these special projects have to be happening so that we actually have a new product or process to move along at these board meetings. Otherwise, all we're going to do is have what becomes frustrating conversations when we set times to actually talk and discuss about these things in length. If people don't show up to those times and those subcommittee meetings, then we cannot move forward on them. And so I will go back in the notes and look to see when it was that Board Member Younger and I met, because she and I met about adjusting bylaws. We also took into consideration some of the things that you had reported or you had submitted for us to consider. And there were 4 board members who were supposed to attend that meeting, and only Board Member Younger and I showed up. And so that is part of the frustration here in this moment, is that some of these things we have talked about and we have opened up opportunities for folks to take some leadership on, and when it doesn't happen, it comes right back to this meeting.
I don't understand why we cannot have that public conversation during our review board meetings. Like, and like, the fact is, like, part of the job of the Civilian Review Board isn't just reviewing cases and then reading them out verbally for, you know, anybody watching online or anybody attending in person. It's very difficult for folks to actually follow along with what is actually happening during our meetings, to have a discussion about policy. And so I'm sorry about this one meeting that you guys held that I wasn't able to attend and 3 other members weren't able to attend.
No, it wasn't 3 other members. It was 2 members, yourself and 1 other.
Okay.
And it's also the subcommittee. Like, everybody has to do kind of their part. And while any other document that the board has voted on as a board and discussed as a board starts first in a subcommittee, and those 3 to 5 people tend to put in some work to put words together, because if we have 11 people for 3 hours trying to work on a document, that becomes unwieldy.
100%,
and so
agree.
the process we have typically taken is an ad hoc subcommittee will put together a proposal with language, submit it to the rest of the board, and then when the board has a full meeting, we can then discuss any edits, additions, changes. Somebody usually takes notes. Frequently, that person was me, and then we go back, re-edit it, bring the final version back to the board, which we can do with several of these things. I can't say we can do it with the database, because that requires money, which we've talked about before. That requires programmers and people to actually create it. That's a whole different that is a power that I don't have. As far as policies and procedures and being able to take a look at things, we can, but we have to do ad hoc work and get a small group of people together to put together something, whether it's a proposal, language, policy, and then bring it to the board. Otherwise, for 3 hours, we're just sitting here talking about this, and it's not productive. And so all I'm saying is we've had these opportunities, and they have to be taken for us to be able to move forward some of these. Some of the ideas you've given have been great, and then when we've had opportunities to move them, there's been some fall flats. So I just don't want us to talk in circles when...
We don't have to talk in circles, but the notion that we aren't, again, they're barely anybody, there's not a lot. I hope there's some folks watching online, I really do. But these meetings are not well attended by the community, and it's not because, like, again, I think we could do a better job, it's just my personal opinion, in terms of making the process of how we operate more transparent. And these subcommittee meetings that you're referring to, like, there's other steps that we can take, right? And so I don't, the notion that it's like we're just not putting the work in, we're not doing this work. Like, a lot of people, a lot of members have been putting the work in, and I believe that this is a volunteer board that people are part of and that are going through the process. And so I just, the frustration that I have is that a lot of this stuff is like we'll get follow-up on, and then it's been a year or 2 years, and we're still asking the same questions. I'm not asking the same questions because I'm not willing to do the work or that folks on this board aren't willing to do the work. I just think that there is a lot of deference that we've been providing, and I get that. I understand that if that as a board is how we want to operate, then that's what we choose. But these aren't just statements I'm making, right? It's what I hear from the community. It's what I hear from others that say, like, are you effective? And I want to be able to communicate, and we should be able to communicate to the public about the work that DIG is doing, the steps that CPD is taking on these issues. That's important to communicate. But most of what we do during these meetings are reading out cases that we've already read and talked about in our subcommittees that make up most of the 2 or 3 hours of our conversations. Like, that's all I'm saying. I'm not like, I'm literally asking for what are some creative solutions for us to move this process forward. That's all.
I think that we're following the law. We're following what the bylaws allow us to do. And we're doing a really good job at it. And our job is to review the complaints that the IG investigates. That is our job. Our job is to meet with our review committee, to set a date, to meet with them and review the cases. And we need to review the cases, and our board members need to have faith that that subcommittee met, reviewed the cases, and gave the citizens their due, so that they can trust, these board members can trust that they've met, reviewed the citizens' complaints, and then it'll go forward to the CPD command. And then they will do their job. And their job consists of giving us that sheet, that spreadsheet, and then we will review it. And if there's anything that we don't agree with, then we can do what we can do. But there's an FOP that we have to deal with, and there's a statute, there are bylaws. We don't have the power to change. I mean, we only have a certain amount of power. But what we've done is really, I mean, the community members that I hear from out in the community are really pleased with it, and we have to be able to explain to them what it is that we can do. And we can't change FOP contract. I mean, there's certain things that we can't undo. On NPR today, they had a thing about Akron is the last in Ohio to get their new civilian board working. And compared to what they're doing and what we have here, we are golden. I mean, what the IG is doing, the work that the IG is doing and the investigations that they're doing are unreal. I mean, they're, and we have to let the people in the community know what the IG is doing, because they're doing a good job, and we're reviewing these, we're reviewing what they're doing. And all I can say is I know I'm on the board and I'm a little bit biased, but I'm pleased with what's going on here.
I mean, I don't even know the last time we've operated as a full board. I mean, I think they're just. I'm just trying to put this. I understand that it's a critique, and I'm trying to think for us to think other ways for us to do this, and apparently that has to come with the proposal that I have to write and kind of put together. But I'm genuinely asking for a process that can make sure that we're able to more effectively do our jobs. I had a statement 2 years ago about the way in which we were doing the subcommittee process, and I didn't think that was the best route, and we should consider other routes to do this. I think Chair Jackson at the time had basically a statement that said, let's just do this now, and we could change it later. Years later, we're still doing that process. I don't necessarily know how effective it is. It is very time-consuming of volunteer board members. It's also when you only have 2 members on a committee or a subcommittee, it should be 3 members on a subcommittee, like that, I don't know how that helps our cause. And then ultimately what ends up happening is that 99% of the decisions that are made we agree with, and we move on to CPD. And so I'm just trying to think about if we're going to use so much time, like 2 or 3 hours of our time, plus the hour or so of the subcommittee meetings, could we not also dedicate more of that time to looking at ways to be more effective as a board? Like that's all. That's all.
Anyone else have anything they would like to add? All right, seeing nothing else, I would entertain a motion. Well, first, take note, our next meeting is Tuesday, September 10th, in which we will have 2 presentations coming to the board. Aside from that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I have a second, please? Yes, Attorney Ross.
I think our office is working with Stephanie to put together a legal update for both the board and the Department of Inspector General, a written update in our efforts to try to get here in person to present if there's further discussion or clarification that's needed. To do that, though, we need your questions about the new contract. Also need the Diggs questions about the new contract. So just a friendly reminder to get those to us so we can start working on written answers. That way you can have information while we work through scheduling to make sure you get your presentations in, but to also give you any updates that you need. So the quicker you can get questions to the city attorney's office about the powers of the board relative to the contract and also to the city code and charter, that would be great. There are things that we can guess, but I want to make sure that we are answering your actual questions. So please send those to us as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Ross.
Thank you.
All right, may I have a second on my motion to adjourn? All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, so adjourned. Thank you.